welcome back to Shannon's Plants Planting Time. How are you today? Today we are going to talk about that pesky little thing that sometimes happens called root rot. So these are some plants. I'm ashamed that I have so many that have experienced, are recovering, or are currently experiencing root rot that are in my collection. So root rot is kind of a topic that might take 2 videos. I don't know yet. We'll see how far we get and how much time. So root rot occurs when a plant sits in water for too long and the roots get exactly what it says, they get rot. And the way you can spot this on your roots is they are brown, they no longer look viable, they are squishy when you touch them. The casing will come off of them very easily. If you pull on them, the outer casing of the root will just kind of come off, leaving a thin, like hair-like structure. And that is when you know that you definitely have a case of root rot. Roots should be white and pretty thick and pretty firm when you touch them. So I'm going to give some examples of my plants that have gone through root rot and some things that you can do. But first I'm going to talk a little bit about what you do if you experience root rot in one of your plants. So the first thing you might realize is that your plant looks underwatered even though you are watering it. And I have an example here. This Burgundy Rubber Tree. See how the leaves are curled? And this plant is not underwatered even though it has these curled leaves like this one. And when I touched the soil, it was very wet to the touch. And when I pulled him out of his cover pot like this, if I can get him out, there was standing water in this pot and his soil was soaked. So what I did was, see a leaf coming off, just falling off, because you might experience that too, leaf loss or yellowing of the leaves. But anyway, what I did for him is I took him out of his soil, the water soaked soil, and I washed him under lukewarm water, and then I cut back all of the roots because he had a lot of viable roots, but he also had some that were definitely in the rot stage. So I took a clean pair of pruning shears that I cleaned in rubbing alcohol, and then I cut back all of the roots that were affected by the rot. And after that, I treated him with 3% hydrogen peroxide, and what I did was I mixed 1 part hydrogen peroxide to 2 parts water, and I just let him sit in that after I had rinsed the soil away from his roots and rinsed him in the lukewarm water and cut the roots that were affected. I let the root ball sit in that solution of hydrogen peroxide because that kills any fungal spores that may be causing the root rot. Because when they get in water like that, it's easy for fungus to multiply, and so you need to kill that. So one way of doing that is to put them in hydrogen peroxide solution, or you can even use, I've heard some people use bleach like 3 drops of bleach to 1 quart of water. I personally have never tried the bleach solution because the hydrogen peroxide has seemed to work for me in the past. So that is what I stick to. Another thing you can do is rinse them in neem oil, a neem oil solution. And I think you put a teaspoon of neem oil to 1 quart of water, and you can mix that up and let the root ball sit in that, because it is a fungicide and it will kill off any fungus that is causing the rot or that has developed because of the plant sitting in water. So after I did all that, I repotted him in new soil. I bleached his cover pot and nursery pot because you want to kill off any fungal spores that are living in the pot itself. So I did that, and now he is on his way to recovery. Now, I think it's important to note that I did not water him immediately after I did that, because I don't want to recreate the same situation that he was in. So I'm going to let him sit kind of dry for a couple of days, and then I will water him and resume my normal watering schedule. And he still has new growth coming out here, and there's some leaves down here. So I think he will be okay, but he had enough viable roots to support all of these leaves, so I didn't feel it was necessary to trim back any foliage or anything. So that is the case with him. Now, the case with this one, this Philodendron Birkin, was I got him. He was one of the first plants that I ordered offline, and I did not know what I was doing, and I simply overwatered him, and I was drowning a lot of my plants at the time, unbeknownst to me. So I got that telltale sign of like wilting foliage even though he was watered, and I pulled him out, and he was definitely rotted, and it was beyond any saving of any of the roots. They were all completely rotted. So I ended up having to propagate this guy. I had to take a top cutting, and I took a bottom cutting, and then I had to trim off a lot of his foliage because at that time he did not have any roots, so he could not support that foliage, and so he was a one leaf wander for a very long time. And I propagated him in water, and then after that I put him in sphagnum, and that is where he grew out his new root system. And then he put out all of these leaves, and he seems very happy. So now that I am a year or so or more into my plant parenthood, I have learned how to water and the need for plants to dry out in between waterings a little bit at least. So he is happy and fine, and he can support all of this foliage, and he even has some aerial roots here, and he seems very happy. So that is a happy ending to my Philodendron Birkin story. The story behind this Burle Marx Fantasy was he was in sphagnum, and again he was one of my first plants that I ordered, and again I noticed that telltale sign of limp foliage even though I had watered him. So I got suspicious, and I took him out of the sphagnum, and his roots were completely rotted. So again, I had to cut off all of his roots, because if all the roots are rotted, you can't salvage any of them. So you have to propagate at that point. So what I did was cut off all of his roots and a lot of his foliage. And let me tell you, at the time, he had a lot of foliage. He did not present well. If I hadn't had been aware of root rot and knew that the limp foliage after watering was a sign of root rot, I probably would have missed it in this guy, because he was big and bushy and looked healthy. You know, from afar it looked like everything was alright, but at that point I had had a lot of plants with root rot, and I noticed that drooping of the lower leaves, and that is why I took him out and inspected. And yes, it did turn out that he had root rot, so I cut off all of his roots and I propagated him in water, and when he grew back some roots, I put him in pond, and I'm seeing how he does in the pond. I do see some roots down here. I don't think you will be able to see them on camera because they are so little, but he is finally growing back. He was 2 leaves for a long time, or he was 1 leaf, and then this one came out, and then this one, and now we have another one fixing to unfurl. And so that is the story with my Burle Marx. And then we have my Anthurium Vittarifolium. The telltale sign for me on this one was these lower leaves. Oh, you can't see. These lower leaves that are yellow. See the yellowing of the lower leaves? And he had no reason. He was not being burnt. He was, you know. So I got suspicious. I pulled him out. He was in soil. And I looked, and some of his roots were rotted. So what I did was I cut back all the roots that were rotted, and I saved the ones that were not rotted. So again, like the story with this Burgundy Rubber Tree, I dipped him in a hydrogen peroxide solution of 1 part hydrogen peroxide to 2 parts water. I let him sit in that for about 20 minutes. And then I placed him back, and I went with pond. I could have gone back with soil or any medium that I wanted. But at the time I was trying pond, so I decided to go back with that. And he has grown a very healthy root system. And let me see if you can see his Antherium have the best juicy roots. So he has grown back his root system, and since then he has put out these 3 leaves, and so he seems happy in pond, and the root rot is gone. Now another situation that happened to me, was this big Philodendron silver sword. Can't even get him in the frame, he's so big. Anyway, he was shipped to me from France, and in the process of being imported to the U.S. from France, his roots dried up, and then when I watered him, when he was here, he got here and I watered him, those dried up roots essentially got overwatered because they shrank when they dried out in shipment. So he got root rot, so I had to cut off all of his roots, and I had to I tried water propagation with him after that, and he just would not grow any roots. It was in February. We are now in August of the same year, so that is how long it took me. And then finally I placed him in pond, and he is putting out this new growth here. So although, well, I have looked, and he had some roots last time I looked, and I've been keeping him in my grow tent, which is very humid, and that has fixed his problem. So all of these are comeback kids, I would say. All of the root rot was caused by something I did, except for this one. The shipping did that. But other than that, these 4 were from me overwatering, and I guess overwatering. So overwatering is a big risk factor to give your plants root rot. So I hope this video gives you some understanding of root rot and different ways that you can either propagate your plant or treat your plant or put it in a different medium, or if it comes like shipped and the roots are dried, you probably should go ahead and clip the roots and start propagating him again. So that is my personal experience with root rot, and I hate it for anybody who discovers it because it's such a downer. And anyway, so I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope it gave you some clarification on root rot and how to deal with it. And I hope you follow me on Instagram at ShannonCollier26. And as always, I hope to see you in the next houseplant video. Bye! Sorry for the long video.